Kyle, this is an exciting episode. It's an episode of firsts. Our illustrious editor-in-chief, Adrian, out for vacation, and unfortunately, we couldn't record ahead of time, so no Adrian for the intro.
I'm here.
You're here, so that's good.
I got you, Adrian.
You have us like a surfboard or something, or like can we put up more comics behind you to kind of make it feel more like Adrian?
I have a deathly fear of the ocean, actually. So
interesting. I got such a beachy vibe from you, though.
It's a computer chair vibe. That's all you should get.
Gotcha. The other first, we're having our first creator on who's not doing a book with Vault. The long-term goal for this show is to get into all kinds of different issues and ideas and roundtables and discussions. You know, we'll still keep coming back to talking about new stuff coming out from Vault, but this is our first foyer into chatting with somebody who is not directly Vault affiliated. We are joined by Captain Midnight for this episode, YouTuber extraordinaire, Nebula content creator, and now comic book writer with Graham's new book, Binary Sea. Graham is Captain Midnight's real name. So we get into crowdsourcing of the book, finding an artist, the process, and, you know, how a life as a YouTuber kind of set Graham up for creative success, what it's like to, you know, balance other endeavors against YouTube demands, building an audience, you know, trying to find your voice and things outside of that once you're established. All in all, really interesting conversation with someone who I am absolutely delighted to know IRL. Oh God, do I sound really old when I say IRL? Be honest, Kyle.
I liked it.
That's not a ringing endorsement, but I had so much fun with this episode. I recorded this just before the holidays, so not in our usual setup here. So for those of you watching on YouTube, just slightly different visual setup with Captain Midnight to keep the illusion going. But was there any part of this episode that you enjoyed or that stuck out to you?
I'm actually a little upset that I did not show for that episode to sit quietly in the background, because I too have tried to be a content creator, and I too would like to one day write some kind of book. And Captain Midnight did both, and he's doing very well at both. So I kind of look up to him a lot and would have liked to pick his brain myself.
Well, I promise the captain will return. We'll make sure that you don't miss that one. Okay. Yeah, this is a really interesting conversation for just a different side of creative venture for anybody who's ever been interested in starting a YouTube channel and what's involved with kind of building an audience, finding your voice, and how to navigate the changing YouTube landscape. Highly recommend that you buckle in and listen to this episode. So without any further ado, please welcome Captain Midnight to the Vaultcast. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and we are joined today by the one and only Captain Midnight, aka Graham Blackaby, YouTuber extraordinaire, and now comics creator. Graham, thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Now, Graham, a lot of folks will be familiar with Captain Midnight, your wildly successful YouTube channel, where you put out weekly videos covering a range of pop culture and media topics. But now you've become a comics creator, and we wanted to have you on and chat a little bit about crowdsourcing your first comic and making that transition. But I want to kind of start back at the beginning. You know, as someone who now covers media professionally and produces videos and now makes comics, what were some early influences on you that made you think, I want to create things, stories, film, television, maybe music, anything, comics, that really kind of got you thinking, hey, I don't just enjoy this, I think I want to make stuff?
Yeah, I was someone who, growing up, I would get very obsessed with specific movies and TV shows for months at a time. Probably starting with, as you can still see in my channel a lot of the time, Spider-Man was a big one very early on. I remember very clearly where I was when I was like 4 years old watching the Spider-Man cartoon for the first time. Those kind of things just kind of hit like a bolt of lightning to me. This is not unique, but the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies were massive for me at the time. By the time Return of the King came out, that was like all I could talk about. And then really, I went through a very long stretch, and this sounds very quaint now, but network TV, I was all about. Starting with Lost, especially, it made me realize kind of what TV could do, how much more it could be than the stuff I was used to watching, Drake and Josh or whatever. This idea that you can have this massive cast of characters and tell both these little stories and these really grand, like overarching stories. Now, you know, with Lost, you can say, oh, they didn't really plan it out. It was all made on the fly in a lot of ways. But I think that's where a lot of the excitement of TV actually comes from. You know, whatever else you can say about Lost, it was always exciting to see how they would find ways to pivot, to try new things with new characters.
I invite anyone who criticizes Lost to try and write 22 episodes of television and see if you don't start scrambling a little bit.
I think they landed the plane really well. You know, I'll go on record now and say that I know people like to bash the Lost finale. I don't think there's as many questions left unanswered as people seem to assume there are. Like, if you actually go back, like, oh, where did the polar bears come from? It's like, they answered that in the show. I don't know what to tell you, but I won't get into my whole Lost defense right now. But yeah, you know, from there, definitely a lot of novels, comic books. I grew up in a town where we didn't really have a comic book store. A lot of the stuff I was reading was older stuff from the library. And when it comes to comics, I feel like that has kind of impacted me in a big way. The fact that a lot of my background in comics, reading them, tends to be like 20 years older than other people my age. You know, for better or worse, that has always been kind of a reference point for me because that's what was at the library.
Sure.
And yeah, I really got into that stuff. The old Ditko, and then Lee, obviously, going forward, the Roger Stern Spider-Man. Yeah, and then also a lot of 2000s like Vertigo and Image stuff was really big for me. I kind of left comic books behind for a little bit, and then I want to say 2019, 2020, where I just really got back into it, started exploring stuff I'd never explored before, and guess I thought about it more critically than I had in the past, and that was really exciting.
Well, at that point, you'd already been on YouTube for a little while, and I'm sure applying that same criticism and depth of study that you had to film and television probably made sense in comics at that point.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, a lot of YouTubers have like channel lore, right? They do comedy sketches. They kind of build little worlds within their YouTube channel. And I think that can be really fun. And some people pull that off really well. I've never really had an interest in doing that. Like, my videos have always been very essay based, very just straightforward, me talking to the audience. And I did kind of want a space to really explore creatively in a way that was completely separate from the channel, in a way that I didn't have to suddenly start writing characters into the YouTube videos, which has never been something that was super appealing to me. And just, I don't know, being able to create whole worlds in a different medium was really exciting.
So you've already, you know, established yourself as a YouTuber, and you've made this pivot into as a comics creator. So this impetus to create, this is a strong impulse that you have. Did you ever like write little plays growing up, or draw things, or write short stories? Like, when did you first start making things?
I wrote a lot of short stories and fan fiction in middle school that never saw the light of day. Like, I know a lot of people, especially with fan fiction, they have this background of posted to all of these older websites. I was always too scared to do that. I was like, I don't want anyone to see this. I'm just going to write this down. It's going to live on my laptop. So definitely a lot of that. I would say as far as YouTube goes, it was really those Red Letter Media videos, the Mr. Plinkett stuff. That was really the first time where I tried to think about YouTube creatively. You know, obviously I make very different content from those videos, but they definitely laid out a framework I think was not just influential on me, but for a whole lot of YouTubers.
Well, you occupy an interesting space on YouTube in that you're definitely doing video essays. But when you say YouTube video essay, people think hour and a half long treatise on a specific piece of media or some historical event or a philosophy thing. But you also are in some ways providing news commentary or essays based around very topical, very recent things. I don't know how you categorize your channel. I've watched your stuff for a number of years before we met, and I always thought of you as the guy who does thoughtful, consumable media criticism, like short form, very topical media essays. How do you talk about your channel and the content and the videos that you make?
Yeah, you probably summed it up better than I could there. I guess for me, this whole thing of like video essays being thought of as these 2, 3, 4, 8-hour things, that's relatively recent. I mean, that's always been around in some form, but I feel like when I started the channel, like the videos I was making, videos being like 10 to 18 minutes long, you know, I'd send it to friends. They'd be like, maybe a little too long. Like, I don't know if I want to sit through a whole 16-minute video. And yeah, just seeing that really flip during the years, it really makes me realize like, oh man, I've been running this channel for a long time now. Now I make like short form content, and I didn't think of it that way when I started the channel really at all. And, you know, I've definitely thought about, do I want to make an hour long, like more documentary type video, 2 hour long, something like that? And maybe someday I will, but I think at the end of the day, length of videos that I make are kind of the length of videos that I watch. You know, nothing against creators who make those really long videos. Some of them are like extremely good. They don't tend to be what I watch though. Like, I don't know. I've always thought of the Captain Midnight audience as, you know, someone who wants something thoughtful to watch on their lunch break or maybe between classes at school or something like that. And that's the audience that I've always kind of kept in mind. And I don't have an academic background. I don't have a master's degree or a PhD. So kind of going into that more like high-end video essay language, I don't want to pretend to be anything I'm not. I just want a good conversation you could have at a comic book store. That's what I'm really trying to provide on my channel, which I know for some people, they want to aim what they perceive as a lot higher than that. And that's great. But I don't know. That's always been the kind of videos that I enjoy. So it tends to be what I aim for.
Conversational, I think, is a key word there. And that's a tone that your videos tend to embody. Like, it doesn't feel like, say, a treatise. It's not a PhD thesis you're never starting a video with. In this lecture, I will be presenting the following, right? And I think that kind of approachability lends itself to an audience of interested and dedicated people, but not necessarily diehards that can go real hard about stuff. Your videos are approachable. I feel like if I saw, say, your Will Smith video that you did recently, if I am not very familiar with Will Smith's career, it's not going to put me off. But if I'm a diehard Will Smith fan, I'm still going to get something out of it. And I think you thread that needle well, where it's approachable to the layman, but still has something worthwhile for the diehard fan. That's the tone I've always inferred from Captain Midnight.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think a lot of creators these days, and again, I don't mean this as a criticism, really aim their videos at their ultra hardcore fans, maybe their Patreon supporters. And that's great, but I've always tried to cut a large swath of the audience to try to make sure that my videos feel like you can walk in not knowing almost anything about the subject and get something out of it, while trying to make sure, like you said, it still has something to offer people who have thought about this topic a lot already.
Well, if you ever get the itch to do an hour and a half long video or something, I got a Nebula subscription now, so just throw it on there. You know, if you want to make something crazy long, just put it up on Nebula. Now, the channel's going well. The channel's successful. You put out a video every week. Subscribe to Captain Midnight, folks. It's a good channel. You should be doing that. But at what point, give me a year, give me a date, give me a time, when did you think, I want to do something else? Like, how long has your comic, Binary C, sort of been in the works? When did this first start percolating for you?
I planned on writing my own fiction before the channel existed. And the first couple years of Captain Midnight was just about trying to keep up with the channel, to keep everything on track, keep everything working, write interesting videos. I would say probably about 2020, really after the pandemic and being stuck inside for so long, was kind of this point of like, okay, I really need to find something. I could either start making those hour and a half long video essays, or I can finally tell some stories. And I ended up kind of creating Binary C from that, which was really influenced by a lot of the movies and shows and books I was reading at the time. And I felt like I wanted to meld this kind of old seafaring stories with science fiction. The idea just seemed so appealing. And at that point, I was like, you know what? I know the hour-long video essays or something like that would probably give me a more like immediate benefit. It might be something that people would expect or want from me more, but at the end of the day, I really want to write fiction for a living, honestly. Like, I have a lot of YouTuber friends who this is like what they've always wanted to do. Their ultimate goal, especially people a few years younger than me, is to make like this type of content online. And while I really enjoy making it, that's never really been me. I've always wanted to branch out into fiction and eventually to live there and to try to. Obviously, most people aren't lucky enough to have that be their only job, but I at least wanted it to be a big part of my life. So that's kind of what I'm prioritizing right now, while also trying to make sure the channel was as good as it can be.
So did you envision Binary C as a comic immediately, or did it take you a minute to find what the story wanted to be?
Yeah, definitely as a comic. I think that the scale of Binary Sea, the type of story that it is, wouldn't lend itself to anything that was within my capabilities in terms of funding a movie or a television show. Like, obviously, that was out of the question. Before I had really jumped back into comics, it was kind of this idea of like, okay, am I doing comics instead of a movie? But the more and more I looked into studying comics as a medium, the more it excited me and the more I was like, no, I think this story has to be told in this way. Not that it couldn't be anything else in the future, but just that I've come a long way in terms of realizing what comics can do and what comics can be. That's really excited me.
So obviously you were reading the comics you were getting from the library growing up, and that had a big influence on you, and you dove back in during the pandemic. Were there any specific comics that you were reading or looking to as you decided you were going to write a comic? Were there any specific titles that you were like, I got to read this one because this is a damn good comic and that'll help me write my own?
Yeah, I really got into Darwin Cook.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you read the Parker stuff?
Oh, yeah. Parker's stellar.
Oh, it's so good.
I want to get the Martini Ultimate Edition so badly.
I have it sitting on my coffee table right now. It is, yeah, I was just flipping through it. Yeah, I love Darwin Cook. I love a lot of his stuff, but especially, that comic also caused me to go back and read all those novels, which there's so many of them. Like, he was putting out Parker novels, Richard Stark was, for so long. But yeah, and then I started going to my comic book store a lot more, just picking up everything from really old, like Savage Sword of Conan. I really like that like black and white era of Conan. The recent Titan stuff is really good. A lot of the Vault stuff, I really like Barbaric. I love the plot. I don't know, there's just been a ton of great indie comics lately, like Paper Girls.
Yeah.
How propulsive that story was. I really loved Paper Girls.
Brian K. Vaughan, I think he's got a career in comics.
Yeah, I think he might be going places.
He might just make it, that Brian K. Vaughan. Well, Kyle, with a little determination, a little bit of effort, Graham pulled it off. Captain Midnight made his own damn comic. The piece of advice that I give everyone who wants to break in: just make a comic.
I actually have my own comic idea that I thought I would pitch to you.
Oh, well, I have absolutely no editorial control or influence over that, so fire away.
Remember that nice picture you made where me and you went to the zoo?
Yes, of course, from the Christmas episode that everybody listening and watching this already saw.
I want to make that a real thing. Like, it didn't happen, right?
Okay.
It was Photoshop, but I want to make that a real story. So I want to write a comic about me and you going to the zoo, but things go wrong and you fall into the tiger pit.
So that's like a cliffhanger? Then you have to save me in issue 2?
No, there's no issue 2. It's a one shot.
I'll dissect this later. Kyle, Graham mentioned a book that he really liked was The Plot. The Plot involves a bunch of untimely deaths and betrayals by people that you would consider family, much like the setup of the comic you just talked about. Why don't we give everybody a nice discount? If you enter code BETRAYAL, you can get 20% off both volumes of The Plot. And hopefully that book won't give you any designs for, ways to mistreat or abuse your own family or podcast producing partners.
I'm going to use that code, actually. I've been meaning to buy that.
Yeah, you're welcome, Kyle. Always happy to do stuff for you.
When writing Binary Sea, I was definitely looking at other comics that have to incorporate this really large cast. The recent Star Trek comics, I really like the Defiance. I think pairing up Spock and Worf, that was just a no-brainer. I've always loved Star Trek. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of been absorbing everything. Like, the new Transformers series is great. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on in comics right now, and it's just been really, really fun to dive into it.
So as you were working on Binary Sea, did you have an artist in mind that you wanted to try and work with? Or if not, how did you go about finding the artist that you found?
Yeah, so Jason, it's weird. I don't remember the order of events anymore. I remember I messaged him about working on the comic right after I saw Sonic the Hedgehog, which means nothing to anyone, but I do have that distinct memory. He had followed the Captain Midnight account on Twitter, and I saw he was a comic artist. Started scrolling through his work and was just really impressed by it. Like, in particular, he has this 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea kind of pinup that I just thought was gorgeous. I was like, this guy can handle all the imagery that I'm putting in this script. Reaching out to him, I was really surprised to find that he wasn't really working in like the most mainstream of mainstream comics. And it just felt like a great opportunity to kind of, I don't know, team up with someone who also was kind of an outsider to the industry a bit while having a lot more experience than me. He's been a great partner. It's been amazing to work with him. And yeah, it's just been really fun.
And Jason Piperberg, he's not like just a line artist. He lettered this as well, right?
Oh, yeah. He inked it. He lettered it. He put in a ton of work on this. Like, I spent so long writing this thing, but then I really can't complain compared to how much time and effort he put into looking into like old ships. And with comics, it's so much easier for the writer to just be like, yeah, you know, this massive shot of this ship with all these guys on it. And then just realizing how much time and effort I've then basically given to another person. It definitely made me think of the collaboration in a different way, and he handled all that stuff really well. But yeah, it definitely made me realize that the whole thing that you always hear comic writers say is like, well, in comics you don't have a budget and that makes it so great. And that's true, but like really realizing how much work you're placing on the artist's back, I feel like I've come to appreciate that way more and be like, okay, if I'm asking someone to put this much effort into this really ornate ship, all of these characters in this one panel, this one page, it has to be worth it. It has to be purposeful.
And you say unlimited budget, right? In comics, you can make anything happen, but there is a budget of human talent, human time, human attention, human research that goes into it. So yeah, you don't have an army of people working on CGI models, but there is effort. There's a lot of effort that goes into this. Before we dive too much deeper into the process, can you tell everybody listening, what's Binary Sea about? Just give us the pitch. What is Binary Sea?
Yeah, Binary Sea is about this British naval ship during the Napoleonic War that find themselves in this, I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but this crazy interdimensional sci-fi situation where suddenly them and their pirate prisoners have to put up with something on a scale they never imagined, never saw coming. It's kind of this ensemble cast of characters learning how to work together. At the most basic level, that's what the story is. There's going to be a lot of surprises along the way. I have some stuff I'm really excited about showing people. And I'm really excited to tell that story because I just find that it's something that never gets old.
As I was reading it, I was instantly transported back to the same feeling I had watching the second Pirates of the Caribbean movie. That's like the level of like high seas groundedness with the military aspect versus the fantastical, and in this case, science fiction element, this interdimensional whatnot. That was like the spirit of it that I got from it. It also kind of reminded me of Prey, the recent Predator movie, in that you have something totally otherworldly confronting something that is very less technologically advanced and much more mundane. I think anybody who's a fan of high sea adventures is going to love this, but the juxtaposition and what that forces the cast to get up to, it's a ride, man. It's really fun.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely take the comparison to the second Pirates movie as a compliment. I really like those movies, especially the first two. You know, the third is great too.
Oh,
After that,
it's still fun.
Yeah, that kind of scale versus the human interaction, which those early movies were still really good at, were very entertaining about. That is kind of what I was trying to capture. I also read a lot of like old naval stories going into this, the Master and Commander novels, the Hornblower books. Those were both really big reference points. But then also like Star Trek Deep Space Nine and the Pirates movies for sure.
Oh yeah, Deep Space Nine or Voyager definitely has some Voyager vibes at the same time.
Yeah, Voyager is a really good reference point to bring up because I like that show a lot, and I also feel like it had so much more potential.
It missed opportunities, and then Deep Space Nine took opportunities that didn't exist. Deep Space Nine was like, hey, we're going to tell like incredibly sophisticated political stories, but don't worry, there's still fun holodeck episodes.
But yeah, I think you have something with the Voyager comparison, especially, you know, having the two crews on board that are having to learn how to work together. That was definitely a big element of it.
Yeah, because you've got the British naval officers, you've got the pirates that they've recently captured. Like in the opening panels, another ship is burning in the background. Like they have just taken the crew, taken some booty. And then you've got the soothsayer that you mentioned on board with her brother. You've just got all these different factions at play on one ship when something absolutely otherworldly happens. So the pieces are already there. Like, this is something I always love in a good genre story, is if you removed the genre element, would the human drama still be there? Would it still play out? And I think with the cast you've assembled, if you took out any interdimensional shenanigans, you've still set the stage for a compelling human drama. If it wasn't otherworldly things having influence over stuff or wreaking havoc, there would easily be human conflict that's already on display in those opening pages. So when you were looking at this, when you were plotting this out, what was the balancing act like between that human drama, the interpersonal relationships, versus the big, splashy, otherworldly insanity? How did you navigate the two things to make sure that they were complementing each other rather than one taking over entirely for the other?
Well, I paid a lot of attention to what I wanted to avoid. And what I wanted to avoid was a lot of really clunky sci-fi or even naval exposition. Exposition has to be there to an extent. And I think there's a way to work it into things in a way that's exciting and still moves the story forward at a good clip. But I've just read a lot of comics, a lot of fantasy sci-fi novels that just really front loads you with, you know, what most people would call the world building aspect of everything. And I understand why, because, you know, the universe that Binary Sea takes place in, I have all these ideas of like, okay, this is how this functions. This is why this works this way. And it is really tempting to just throw it all out there. I have these big concepts that I want to put front and center in front of everyone immediately. And I get a lot of that stuff out through just these documents of what this world is like, what I plan to do in the future. I feel like getting all of that out privately and just having that knowledge in the background is super, super useful for when you actually sit down and write the dialogue, write the story, because you're able to weave in elements of it while also always making sure that the focus is on these characters, their immediate concerns, and trying to keep that immediacy in mind. Like, what's everyone's goal in this scene, separate from what I want to do with the world building or how this universe works. Trying to make sure that you keep the small scale personal stakes at the forefront of your mind when you're writing these things. I think that's just really important. And it's something that I think it's lost in a lot of genre fiction. The genre fiction that doesn't tend to work for me, I mean, you know, some people can pull it off amazingly well. But for the most part, I think for me, I always wanted to start with the human element first, try to figure out where these people are coming from and build those elements in from there. Don't front load it with aliens, dimensions, all of that stuff, but try to weave that in a way that plays into all of these personal stakes that are so important to what's right in front of the characters.
Well, and I think when you look at the genre stories that do give you sort of info dump world building, they tend to be third person omnipotent voices in novels. And that's where you can express that kind of thing to a reader because it doesn't shatter the world and it's not Gandalf turning to Frodo and saying, well, as you know, in the third age, you know, it's not the same kind of grinding everything to a halt. But by having that document, by getting all of those rules and all of the details down and knowing your world inside and out like that, I'm sure it makes it easier to approach the character writing because you know what they know. If you inhabited this world and you're existing in this reality, here's everything that you would just know as a person, and you don't have to turn to another person and say, well, as you know. So I think in comics especially, that could have been an easy trap to fall into of like, well, I got to explain everything that's happening here, but it's a visual medium and an info dump like that would probably have taken the wind right out of your sails, if you will pardon a bad pun.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. And it was really hard at first. Like, I realized working with Jason, I thought my first draft that I had done a really good job of that. And Jason pointed out, like, these dialogue panels, they're still really long. And taking a second look at that and kind of being able to, after he had drawn some pages, being able to better visualize how everything is going to lay on the page. You can read so many comics, but until you write one, at least for me, it was a night and day experience of being like, okay, wait, this is how many words can really fit in a panel on a page without it feeling really cumbersome. And coming to that realization was actually exciting. It was a little freeing a little bit because it made me realize realize how much bloat there was in a lot of my dialogue. Mm-hmm. And going back and kind of carving into that, making everything a little more succinct, hit a little harder, I feel like it did the comic a real service in the end. And I was really grateful to be able to work with an artist who could help teach me that.
Well, because you didn't have an editor on this at all. Was it entirely just a back and forth between the two of you to get that feel and to make those adjustments? Or were you sharing the work in progress with any third party and getting an opinion on it?
Yeah, no, there was no editor on this at all, which, that would be nice at some point in the future. But yeah, it was really the result of hours-long conversations that I would have with Jason on the phone. We'd get on the phone like once a week, and we'd often talk for 2-3 hours about the story, about anything else, and yeah, really get into it. And that was a great experience.
Now, as you were getting into the actual production of the book, the making of the art, and doing these edits, going back and forth, had you always planned to crowdsource the book?
Yeah, I self-financed it. So technically, I could have just been like, hey, here's the online store where it lives, buy it right now, right? But the crowdfunding kind of came about from the fact that I really wanted to be able to fund the second issue. Mm-hmm. The crowdfunding, yes, it's to be able to get it out to everyone and the shipping costs and all that, but really it's to fund the second issue. And that's where it was super, super important. I'm glad that went well because I could not afford to do one of those every year because a comic is obviously much more affordable than a film or something, but it was definitely a big risk. It was definitely something that I saved up for over time. Yeah, I'm glad to not do that for the second issue.
You didn't launch it on Kickstarter. You used Zoop. And I was wondering if you could explain to folks what Zoop is and what attracted you to putting the book on Zoop.
I was really into Zoop early on just because they offer so much support. Obviously, Kickstarter is this massive website. Comics aren't even the main focus of it. It's a thriving element of it, but it's not like Kickstarter is a comic book focused website. And with Zoop, it is. And the guys over there were just really easy to work with. I could always reach out to them at any time. And it was a really good fit for me, especially for this first campaign. I don't have any experience in crowdfunding at all. I had never set foot in this world. So having kind of a partner there to kind of tell me like, okay, this is how things are usually done. How do you want to adjust it? And really working with any of the weird ideas I had, like giving away the comic for $2. There was some pushback for that for sure. I was actually glad to have Zoop there to be like, okay, so this is usually not how it's done, but if you want to do it, we'll do it. But it was good to know like, what are the standards and kind of where do I want to stick with those and where do I want to go kind of off on my own road? And Zoop was a great partner for that.
And in addition to just being, a good partner for the actual campaign, my understanding that Zoop has like printing services available, like they're responsible for the actual physical production of the book. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different for smaller campaigns. I think it may be a little different, but for us, yeah, like Zoop is handling the fulfillment and stuff. And that is huge. Like as someone who has never done that, that is definitely something they're bringing to the table that is incredibly helpful for sure.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a extremely first-time creator, first-time crowdfunder, like friendly place to be. Like this, you couldn't have found a better home to get yourself going.
Yeah, especially being lucky enough to have a pre-existing audience, being able to just have that space where I can bring people in through the channel and they can handle the back end stuff. They can handle the fulfillment. It made it a really good fit for me for sure.
That's fantastic. So now that the first campaign has funded successfully, and I know the first issues that are digital have already gone out and the physicals will be coming soon, have you started working on issue 2 of Binary C yet?
Yeah, so issue 2 is fully written. There's some stuff in the script that I want to tweak before it's finalized. But yeah, Jason should start the art in January. Yeah, he's got a lot of work right now, but he's getting through it. And we're going to start the second issue up soon. And yeah, hopefully by May or a little after that, we can have the second issue going.
That's fantastic. Are you going to put it up on Zoop again?
I haven't decided. I would like to, especially, we'll see how this fulfillment process goes. I think they'll do a great job with it. They've been really responsive and helpful so far. But yeah, like if it works, I would love to continue to use Zoop.
Now, without getting into too many spoilers, I do think that the captain of the ship has a very interesting time in the first issue. And I was curious, we're looking 10 years in the future. Binary C has had 50 issues. It's collected in a compendium. You've sold the Hollywood film rights and you're talking to the casting director. Who are you telling them to go after to play the captain?
So The captain's original name in the script, this is a little embarrassing, but this is how on the nose it was Stewart. Like, when I was describing what the captain looked like to Jason, it was the Vulture from Spider-Man and Patrick Stewart are the same guy now. Patrick Stewart maybe past the age where he would play that character these days, but I still have to go with him because he was definitely a big source of like what that character's look is, his demeanor. He definitely doesn't have a Captain Picard vibe about him, but a lot of other elements. Right.
He's closer to a Khan than a Picard. That's for sure.
But yeah, a lot of other elements were definitely inspired, kind of his poise, his way of carrying himself. I was definitely thinking of Patrick Stewart quite a bit when writing it.
He's a very British man in that way, the captain.
Extremely.
So, Graham, now that Binary Sea has set sail, again, that is not my last naval pun of this episode, but I can't help myself. And you're well on your way with issue 2. Are you looking at other comics? Are you looking at novels? What else are you working on? What else is kind of going on in the background as you try to expand out from YouTube into narrative storytelling?
Yeah, I have another comic coming up that I haven't found an artist for yet. I'm working on the script actually right now, and I'm really, really excited about it. All of this could change, but I will say the Conan side of comics, maybe even the Punisher side of comics, kind of the more ultra violent stuff. Binary Sea is very, very separate from that, right? It's much more science fiction based. It's much more based around an ensemble cast. This next comic, I really want to be stark and brutal and something that people probably won't expect from Captain Midnight. I'm really going to go for it on this next one. I think it's going to surprise people.
Ooh, that sounds exciting. I'm getting Primal vibes, the Gendy Tartakovsky show.
Oh, yeah. I love that show.
Oh, so good. Well, I would be remiss if we had you on an episode and I didn't ask you. This is January 2024 here that this episode is coming out, but looking back at 2023, were there some highlights, some standouts from the year in either comics or film or TV? What did you really enjoy this year in 2023 that you watched or read?
Well, I'll start with a movie I just saw with you, Godzilla -1. I do think that was my favorite blockbuster this year. And I really don't say that like just because we just saw it the other week. Like, I was really impressed by that movie. I loved that movie a lot.
It was so good.
It was. Yeah. And it's embarrassing to say this as someone who talks about movies like professionally on the internet, but I'm so behind on a lot of the stuff that I know I'll love. Like, I did love Killers of the Flower Moon is great. Oppenheimer is great. But there's so many movies I still need to go back and watch just because I've been so focused on the comic. It has really like eaten away a lot of this year in a way that like I'm going to keep going, obviously, but I'm excited to have a little bit of a break and to be able to sit down with a lot of the stuff that I've just been missing for months now.
Well, I'm not going to ask you to tell on yourself and tell us that you didn't see Barbie or something crazy like that. Instead, I'll say, did you read any good comics this year?
I would say some of the biggest ones for me this year was Titan's Conan run, the Jim Zub written stuff. I'm really, really enjoying right now. Mark Waid's current World's Finest run. Really like that from the big two because one, it's actually running for a decent amount of time. I feel like so much stuff from the big two, it makes sense from indie publishers where a lot of these stories are planned to be short from the beginning. But for the big two, I really miss those like long runs where you can stick with the title for multiple years. That World's Finest title is really doing that. And I was really skeptical when he kind of brought back the Kingdom Come stuff. Like, how was that going to be able to play out in this kind of more Silver Age inspired story that he's doing right now? And I was really impressed. It all feels of a piece. It's all really exciting. It's fast moving, which I really like in superhero comics. I feel like that's overlooked sometimes in a lot of superhero comics. I feel like some of them I read and I'm like, it feels paced for a trade, which is fine. I understand that's how a lot of stuff is written these days, but World's Finest feels like a throwback to really issue-based comics, and I'm enjoying that a lot.
And no filler episodes. Mark Waid knows his shit. He knows how to write a damn single-issue floppy that is a story in and of itself, like whether it's part 3 or part 10 or whatever of an arc, that individual issue is going to feel like its own story.
Probably been my favorite Cape book this year overall. And then the the indies, it's hard to keep track of everything that's coming out. There's so much stuff coming out. A lot of it is really good. I do really like Hell to Pay, which I believe is from Image. That's been really, really entertaining. Public Domain. But yeah, for those who haven't read that one, that's Chip Zdarsky's kind of a very grounded story about the comic book industry itself and kind of this Jack Kirby-like figure getting the rights back to one of his classic characters and only the comic book rights, and kind of trying to restart, finally telling the stories his way. It was kind of a slice of life book as well. And I guess I'll double up on Hell to Pay and say Barbaric Hell to Pay also I've really been enjoying. Either of those titles can't go wrong.
If it says Hell to Pay, pick it up. But you heard it from Captain Midnight, folks.
You were probably really surprised to hear both those titles then.
So internally, we just called it Hell to Pay. But then I was like, oh, right, the other Hell to Pay. God, that's hilarious. Well, Graham, thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Obviously, people can find you on YouTube at Captain Midnight, the channel. It comes up pretty easily. It's not hard to find. But if folks want to pick up a copy of Binary C, where can they grab that?
Yeah, if you go to my YouTube channel, I should have it really readily available in a store that I've connected to my YouTube channel. I'm still setting that up right now. When this is out, it should be up. But yeah, for now, just check the channel, and wherever you can buy it, you'll find that info there.
Fantastic. Graham, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you stopping by. Go check out Binary C, find Captain Midnight on YouTube, and you can pick it up from there. But Graham, thanks a million. So great having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Captain Midnight. That's the thing he does on his YouTube channel, but I've always just wanted to do that. And I couldn't bear to do it during the interview, so I thought I'd do it at the end here. I had such a great time talking with Graham, and I sure hope that he'll come back and see us again and talk about Binary C issue 2 and, chat about more YouTube stuff, maybe get into the nebula of it all. There's plenty more to talk about. Plus, Graham is also just super effing knowledgeable about film and stuff. Finally met a bigger movie nerd than me, who knows more credits and more IMDb stuff. So long and happy future hanging out with Graham IRL. Again, does that make me sound old? I think it makes me sound old. But also, we'll have him back on the show. So thanks everybody for tuning in to this episode. The Vaultcast is produced by the man, the myth, the legend, Kyle Foucher. It's hosted by this schmuck, Daniel Crary. The logo was designed by the effervescent Tim Daniels. Social media support provided by the fabulous Britta Bisher. The Vaultcast is a copyrighted production of Vault Comics. Copyright 2024. Happy New Year. All rights reserved.